Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Violent Night, a movie that is so action focused that I feel it doesn't really need a story. Because it kind of just really doesn't try to really have a story or a good one. So, with that said, we go into this film and we have a Santa Claus that is to have kind of given up on the whole Christmas spirit of things. It seems that Santa Claus is just a state that the one happiness that kids are going to have when they open up some present is to be quickly like vanished to then go on to see what the next gift is, what the next big item is. And Santa's more and more realized that all people care about is the latest and greatest video game or the newest item. And so Santa then realizes that there's no way to satisfy anybody. So we tell you in this movie, even to kind of blatantly showcase it in this film, when Santa goes on and grabs this, like, oh, this is the Die Hard like movie collection. And so it kind of tells you that someone was to go on and just see a lot of Die Hard movies and then write this film. So there wasn't much thought to be put into this film, but just kind of really just like, oh, okay, well, like, let's copy and paste in the Die Hard movies. And we also, like, really have a scenario that is just like Die Hard, with the exclusion of, instead of John McClane, we have Santa Claus instead. So, kind of the wrong place at the right time kind of thing for our character here. So, we have some really good one-liners from Santa Claus or John Leguizamo or even Gertrude, who is to be kind of like the rich grandmother. But I think this movie really picks up like an hour in. Like, I think the movie really goes on and is to really be interesting like an hour in. But it's those first like hour of things where it's just like, okay, like, this is a really slow build movie. All right. So, like, we still have quite of the typical action things. Like, I would also want to compare this movie to like Air Force One, with the exclusion of it being in a house instead of on a plane. But, like, to me, again, you have a certain person that has to go on and fight off these certain people. So, with that said, so we come to find out that Santa is delivering presents on this night, and he ends up going on to deliver presents at this one home, to then realize that all of a sudden this home is getting infiltrated by a bunch of men who want to go on and steal from this rich woman, because they realize that this rich woman is to go on and have $300 million being sent out as blood money, and so they want to go on and try to take this from her, because they realize that she has gone on to do some horrible things with the riches that she has. So we have Gertrude that is to go on and tell these men, it's like, well, hey, you better get my money fast, because I have a kill squad. I have a kill team. So we have that all going on, but then we also have this family that is kind of going through some rough times. We have Trudy that, instead of really wanting like the normal Christmas gift, all that she really is hoping for this Christmas is that her mother and dad can get back together. So we end up having that and freaking transition to going on to have this family get together that is to be taken via Christmas Eve to go into Christmas Day. So we're gonna have all of our characters just try to go on and pull off some Christmas stuff, some Christmas miracles. So we also have a reference of Home Alone in this movie, and we're just like, okay, how is that gonna pay out? And then bizarrely, it does. So yeah, so we have a whole lot of stuff kind of going on in this film. But so with that said, let's go on and let's double five this bad boy up because it's about that time, of course, again to go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this movie. So at the end of the day, this movie was okay. It's a very soft okay, but still okay at the end of the day. Also, again, it kind of really picks up after like the first hour or hour and 15 minutes. It really gets going. So so we have like 30 minutes really of this film that is really good, which is kind of horrible. 30 or 40 minutes really of solid good things going on, and there's brutal action, and there's some good things here. Where can you go on and see this movie? You can see it on Yes Movies. It's kind of a bootleg version that isn't all that clear or cut or whatever. But you can still see the movie anyways. One problem that I had with is like, what happened to Sugar Plum? Like, I was just like, okay, like this is kind of the techie person, but where does she get taken out in this film? Anyways, I think it's about that time. Let's go into spoilers. So, in the beginning of this movie, like I'm gonna go on and I'll like cover this at first. Like I'm not gonna do this perfectly like the film as always for every single one of these. So we have Trudy. And so Trudy is going on to talk to her parents, and it's to mention that she was never able to go to a department store to go and talk to Santa to state what she wanted for Christmas. And so Jason and Linda are like, yeah, like we really didn't have time this year. Ugh. So, and I guess it was really up to Jason, and Jason dropped the ball on that. So, Jason runs off to find this walkie-talkie that he's going to give to Trudy and tell her, oh yeah, this walkie-talkie, it's magic. You can go on and you can talk to Santa through this walkie-talkie, and you can tell him what you wanted for Christmas. So, Trudy ends up keeping to this walkie-talkie, and so when Jason and Linda are to kind of close this door, they start to listen in as Trudy is talking to this walkie-talkie, and that's when Trudy ends up asking, like, well, hey, I don't really want much for Christmas this year, Santa, but I want my family get back together. So Jason and Linda are just like, oh, like, that's the one gift that we can't really give her. And so Linda walks off. So we have the next morning where the three of these bit of family are all going on uh, to talk to this this gate guard that is going to let them into the Trudy Mansion, or the Gertrude Mansion. My bad. So we have Trudy that goes on and asks this security guard, it's like, well, hey, like, what did you want for Christmas? And he goes on and states, it's like, well, I wanted this holiday off, but like it looks like I'm naughty this year, so I'm working. So the gate ends up getting open, and the family ends up going into this mansion. So we end up finding that Jason, Linda, and Trudy are all to be met by Alva, Morgan Steele, and Bert. Bert seems to be focused on doing every single bit of his live streams, and he's going on through the house. He's like, hey, yeah, hey, guys, hey, yeah, I'm here, woo. Isn't that like every live streamer? Isn't that like every person that goes on and does a review or anything that they do on YouTube, or just does any social media live streams for whatever reason? So, so we go on to, of course, have Alva that is telling Jason, it's like, man, the one gift that I'm hoping for this Christmas is for like our mother to finally kick it, so you and I can kind of take over the business. Yeah, probably run it into the ground and then probably just try to like sell it to just get whatever money you can. So Jason is like, yeah. So we come to find out that Bert had been named after Bertrude, and Trudy had also been named after Gertrude also, but she's being called Trudy now. So anything to go on and suck up to Gertrude until she dies. So supposedly, at some point, she might. So we now have me want to go on and cover like the rest of this film. So we have Santa that is going on at this bar drinking away and just pounding out the beer. And so we all of a sudden have this Santa that comes in, possibly from this department store, to have had a number of kids just kind of all sit on his lap and tell him what they want for Christmas. So we have we have the Santa Claus, who's played by David Harbour, Harbauer, the guy from Stranger Things and Hellboy, and a lot of other things, I'm sure, that I've forgotten about at some point. So he was in a Liam Neeson movie once. I don't remember what it was called, but he was in a Liam Neeson movie. So we have Santa Claus going and talking to this pub Santa, and we have the pub Santa that's been stating that he's been doing this for 4 years, and it's all about the expression on the kids' faces, that they light up. And Santa Claus is like, well, yeah, I've been doing this for I don't know how long. Like, I've forgotten how long I've been doing this. That's how long I've been doing this for. And Santa Claus is stated, it's like, well, yeah, like the bright expression that is to be upon their face quickly gets snuffed out because it's always about the latest and greatest, like, video game or just money that they want, and there's no way to satisfy a kid anymore. And to the point where Santa is to realize that this may be his last year. So Santa is to go on and make his way up onto the roof, and had given this bartender this gift for her grandson to just say, like, yeah, it's just some other video game thing, here you go. And the bartender's like, how did he know that I had a grandson? And how did he know the kid's name? So we have the bartender that goes onto the roof, realizing that this Santa, like, is on the roof, and it doesn't make sense. So the bartender's like, well, hey, I have no insurance. Like, don't go on and just hurt yourself up here. So the Santa Claus is to go on and get on his sleigh and drive off. And by the time the bartender makes it on the roof to realize that Santa is really riding off, the Santa goes on to barf on the bartender. And so we have the bartender that's like, oh, and Santa's just like, yeah, ha, 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 and just starts driving off. So this Santa Claus would rather, like, bury himself in a bottle of booze than drinking eggnog, is what we really see here. This Santa that is really just burnt out from all the years of doing this. So we have Santa Claus that goes on to then make his way through all these homes. He's going on to put just a ton of money in a bunch of these kids' stockings, and he's putting all these video game things down on all these Christmas trees. And so Santa goes on to find that there is one dad who has fallen asleep by this recliner. And so Santa goes on and takes this 6-pack of beer and is to kind of eat every single cookie that he ends up finding. So we have this Santa that goes on to just, like, pop one of these one of these beer cans, and he starts just kind of downing it. So Santa then goes on to make it to Gertrude's home, and is to go on to like pour out this skim milk, and is to look at this alcohol that seems to be this, like, 1938 bottle that's like some pre-war stuff. So we have Santa that goes on and starts drinking this alcohol and is eating this homemade cookie, and he sits at this chair that starts vibrating. He's like, oh, this is good. while Santa was to also get into the chimney of this house, we have the reindeers that are just starting to poop on these people's roofs. And we had Santa that goes on of like, oh my god, like, could you guys just not be pigeons? Like, come on, like man, you just kind of crap everywhere. Very unprofessional. And plus, also like Rudolph probably wouldn't be doing this. So we we have Santa into the house, and he is in this vibrating chair. So Trudy at one point is to reference that she had gone on to see like Home Alone because she states like, "Yeah, you filthy animal." So everybody's all in this house together, and so we have Alva, Morgan, and Bert that are trying to get right to this door where Gertrude is to come in, and Alva, Bert, and Morgan are like, "Well, hey, it's suck up time," and Alva is kind of looking, or Alvo, uh, no, Alva is looking at Jason's like, "Well, hey, why isn't your family sucking up?" And Jason's like, "No, you guys can go on and do all the sucking up. Like, I'm just gonna stay back here. I don't really care." So Alva is like, "Okay, all right, okay." So when Gertrude comes in, they go on and they just baby and pamper her and whatever. It's just like, oh my god, Gertrude's here! Wow, is great. So we go on to after Gertrude is to come in. Then all of the guys are to start to sit up. That they're going to go on and start to take everybody out. And so we have Gingerbread that comes in to talk to the security guard about like, well, yeah, like Christmas's date is great and all, but you guys don't have the one holiday that I celebrate. And the security guard's like, oh, what is that? And Gingerbread states Boxing Day, and he punches this guy out. So we have everybody that's like, okay, since Gertrude's out, let's kind of set this all up. So everybody is kind of getting a roll call. They're giving their nicknames. We go on to have John Leguizamo's character that arrives by this gate to then talk to this gate guard, and he's mentioning that he had some car trouble, and the guy is like, well, hey, this is a very private road. I don't know how you got all the way here. And John Leguizamo like, well, yeah, like I like had to like schlep all my way here, I had to walk all my way here, and now like my feet are frozen. So like, hey, do you think you can help me out? Like, give me a an ability to get to a phone so I can call AAA. So by the time that the guy is reaching for a phone, John is reaching for his gun and pops the killer here, and so or pops the gate guard. So we find out that John Leguizamo is Scrooge, and then we start setting up that all these people have these goofy, weird names like Gingerbread, Sugar Plum, Candy Cane, Krampus, so on and so forth. We have all these goofy names, Tinsel, and so on and so forth. Frosty, everybody's kind of saying their names. And we have Gingerbread that goes on and states like, "We're seriously not going to use all these goofy names all day, all night long, are we?" And it's like, well, yeah, like that's the whole point of it. So we go on to have the whole house that is starting to get infiltrated. So we start to have a number of shots that are being fired. So Santa is kind of hearing some shots being fired, and he's like, oh my god, like I should hide somewhere. And so he tries to kind of like rub his nose to try to get into the chimney, but it's not working. So Santa then goes on and decides, like, well, I need to hide somewhere. So we have Gertrude that is immediately grabbed to go to her panic room. We have Morgan Steele that is realizing she's going to her panic room, and so should they. So the family members are all trying to run to get to Gertrude because she knows where the panic room is. And so all the family members are like, well, shouldn't we all go into the panic room too? And like they're trying to make offers to say like, well, shouldn't other people go in there too? So we like Bert is saying like, well, I should go into the private room or panic room, right? Like beyond my mom. And so Alva is trying to make an offer. It's like, well, hey, should Bert make it in the panic room too? So, anyways, they all run off, and we have Scrooge that finds Gertrude, and it's to start to one by one easily take out all these security guards by himself. It's a lot of times where in this movie where Scrooge is kind of slapping around Gertrude throughout this film. So we have Scrooge that goes on and takes everybody back into the one room while some of the guards are watching over them. And so as they're going on and cleaning out the house, we go on to have a guy named Tinsel who is to find Santa, and he's in this room. And so Tinsel obviously finds where Santa is. He's behind this tree. So we have Tinsel that goes on and fires this gun, and we all of a sudden see the reindeers are kind of leaping off the roof and going on to the next house. And so Santa then goes on to be fighting with Tinsel, and he's grabbing these lights from this tree and is trying to try to wrestle. We have Tinsel that is also taking these lights and kind of almost choking out Santa. So we get to one point where Santa is to show how much larger he is compared to Tinsel. And so Santa ends up finally figuring out a way to wrestle and take this guy down. And so what happens is Santa ends up stabbing this guy in the dick with this thing, and then grabs all these lights around him and tosses him out this window. But then Santa then realizes that he's also connected to the lights too. So as this guy is to go falling off of this out of this window, we then have Santa who's following him. So Santa is to start to see that his sleigh and his reindeer are leaving off, and so Santa, of course, is ticked. So we have Santa that is to realize that, hey man, maybe I should go on and just leave. Maybe I should get out of here. And so Santa gets really tempted, but it's like, no, these people are in trouble. I need to go on and help them. So Santa just goes right back into the house. So we end up having our villains find out that someone had taken out one of theirs, and just to see them dead, it's like, okay, I guess we have a gopher here. It's like, there's so much about this that is just copy and paste from every action movie that you've ever seen. So much about this is just so, even the lines that they deliver, it's just like, man, I've heard this line a billion times. Through every one of these action movies, they're all the same. But again, I guess the real reason why they did this movie is because, we've heard it a billion times, but it's always a good line. It's always a good thing. And so, maybe everybody wants to see, an old-fashioned action film be recycled again. And so that might just be the pattern that all of a sudden everything goes into. Because all it takes is one movie where it's like, oh my god, there's a sequel, a sequel reboot. Oh my god, that's a great idea. Let's have 30 different other movies go on and do the same thing. It's gonna be like that. Where they see one idea of one movie and then they oh my god, let's recycle. I'm waiting for Die Hard, the early years, or something like that. Where you get a younger John McClane or some goofy story like that. I'm just waiting for it to happen. Or Rambo, the younger guy. Predator, the early alien. Something. I'm waiting for it to happen, for them having to do a reboot, but they kind of did that with Prey, so they did it anyways. Let's move on. So we have Santa that goes back into the place, and so he's bumping into yet another one of these men that of course ends up being Frosty. Santa is in this other part of this place, just kind of rushing through this sack, hoping that he can go on to find some sword or some weapon that he can use against this guy, and he instead finds this Santa statue, and he's like, well, good enough. So Santa goes on and bashes this Santa statue against Frosty, and then we go on to have them both fight it out. So they have obviously like pool cues and uh like billiard balls they can use here, but I don't think they obviously use that enough. But so we have Santa that is desperately coming out of these sacks with these like stick like items so he can try to fight off against Frosty. We even go on and have Santa at one point having uh this stocking that he puts these billiard balls in and starts using it as a weapon against Frosty, and it goes pretty well until the stocking rips, and then Santa's like, well, like I guess there goes that, because we had Frosty that had this knife, and so Santa Claus just uses this stocking with the billiard balls. So Santa ends up getting stabbed. So we have Santa that goes on to uh, to try and fight off Frosty, and so he is to be kind of on the ground, kind of wrestling with Frosty. We have at one point where Santa uses all of these Christmas tree items to start like just shoving it into Frosty's face and having all this glass kind of break onto Frosty's face. We get to a point where Santa grabs this Christmas tree star and is to jam it into the guy's eye. Frosty then finally backpedals, and it feels like that's not the definitive thing to kill Frosty here. Then Santa turns on this Christmas tree light, and we then have Frosty that is getting electrocuted and falls over, and his face starts to light on fire. Santa then realizes he notices a walkie-talkie, and so he grabs the walkie-talkie. So Santa's hoping that maybe he can go on to a frequency to catch the police and maybe try to figure out a way to save this family. So we go on to have, now that Frosty is dead, we have our characters, they're just like, okay, like now Frosty's like obviously like not like calling us, so yeah, like we definitely have somebody here that's messing up our plans. It's not just some accident. So we have Scrooge, who is consistently calling for Frosty, and so Santa ends up getting on the walkie and is like, Frosty? And so we start to have Scrooge and Santa talking to one another, and we have the cliche-ish line that John Leguizamo delivers, all about how, like, oh, are you just some guy that's seen way too many action movies, or are you just a rent-a-cop that is to, like, try to get your money for tonight? And so Santa Claus ends up just kind of stating that he's like, oh, well, I'm Santa Claus. It's like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to ruin your holiday, as well as, because we have, like, Scrooge, who's just like, well, yeah, I'm going to ruin this holiday, and because he hates it. He hates Christmas. And he'll explain later why in the film, hopefully when I get to that, because there's a lot of stuff to just unpack through this film. So we had Scrooge and the villains who are trying to go on and break into this vault. And so when they finally do break into this vault, they realize that there's no money there. And so while that's going on, we have Krampus, who's suggesting, the villain Krampus suggesting, that maybe they should start going on and opening up presents, because who knows if they're ever going to really have any of these people live through the night. So everybody is just realizing that they should just open presents for Gertrude. So we have it first that Morgan Steele goes on to give Gertrude this present that it should just have a bunch of fun facts all about him, and that he's really big in Asia. And Alva's like, yeah, me and him went to Asia one time and we couldn't even get a parking spot, or it's just like crowds of people. So we go on to have Alva, who gives Gertrude this present of just some picture of Alva and Gertrude, and and Alva, uh, the day that she had been birthed, and Gertrude was like, "Well, yeah, I was there." So Krampus then takes the frame and then chucks it and breaks it. So we then go on and have Jason give a present to Gertrude, and Jason's like, I don't want to give her a present. I'll give it to her tomorrow. And so Bert's like, no, 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 I'll give her your present. Like I know where it is. So Jason gives, or Jason technically gives Gertrude this present from Bert's hands. So Gertrude then opens this and is to realize that it's like, oh, it's my favorite alcohol that I like. Oh, great. So we then have Gertrude that then is to read this note and then is to put it in her like in her blazer, and is to state like that she's not going to go on and say what the card says. She's going to just leave it to her and Jason, and we end up finding out later what that whole thing really meant. So we have Trudy, while there's gift giving going on, we have Trudy who is trying to call Santa and eventually gets connected. So we have Trudy that is talking to Santa as Santa is to sew up his wounds and is to talk to Trudy. And so Trudy's trying to be as quiet as can be and is talking to Santa. So Trudy is stating that she, of course, was very hopeful that she was to ask uh, ask for certain things, and so she asks if like this is really Santa, and Santa's like, well, of course, like yeah, I'm really real. So we go on to have at certain points in this movie that Santa convinces Trudy how real he really is and how much knowledge he really knows. So Santa goes on and just kind of like scrolls and kind of looks to see who Trudy really is. It's like, oh, okay, all right, because Santa is good with names, but there's sometimes he also needs a scroll to like see certain people and get the knowledge of them. So like it's somewhat like he knows things, but then he also is to um, need to kind of look things up. So we have Santa that is kind of sewing himself up and puts this little like gift wrapping thing as a thing to kind of bandage his wounds, and then he puts clothes back on. So we come to find out also in this movie that Santa has this kind of backstory where he, of course, at one point was called Nick Mond LaRouge, or Nick Mung the Roog, and supposedly he was at one point this kind of barbarian, and if anybody was to have been on the naughty list when he was much in his younger days, like it would have been him. He would have been at the top of that naughty list, but somehow he then turned around and became Saint Nick, and I guess was to try to even out all that bad by doing all of this good. But so, and also he used to have this like skull breaker axe. So they were kind of building up Santa as being this like Thor kind of character, bizarrely, because we have to make that comparison. Because what other barbarian character that wields a hammer or an axe or wields a sledgehammer in this case is to go on and be that kind of character? So we in this story we have the villains try to go on and get into this vault that has this huge bit of money that is to all be this kind of blood money. So we have Scrooge that goes on to state to Gertrude like what all this money was used for, and was used in for bad things. So we, by the time they end up opening up this vault, they realize that all the money is gone. So they then go on to torture all the people to try to get information from all of them, and they start to like nutcracker body parts like fingers, or they want to also go after one of the character's balls, which of course is all to be Jason, to try to figure out like, okay, where is this money? So we have Jason that is to go on and be tortured about where this money is, and so nobody really knows. And also Bert is to say, it's like, well, what if you torture to death the one person that is to have this information? And Scrooge is like, shut up, kid. So so we go on to find out that Jason had stolen all the money from the vault, and he of course had this letter given to his mother stating this as evidence that he did take all the money. And so now they're like, okay, where is the money? So we have Trudy that is trying to go on and telling like these guys is like, well, hey, Santa's gonna help us, Santa's gonna save us. And finally Jason convinces Trudy that Santa is not real, and that the real presents are given to her by her parents. And so it's like, oh, she knows the truth. So Morgan Steele to ask like, Alva, is that true? So we have this like kind of funny adult moment. So we have Trudy that gets so upset she runs off to this attic. Candy Cane tries to chase after her. So we finally go on to now have Trudy, who again is calling Santa, and we have Santa going on and starting to realize more and more like how difficult this is really going to be, and how more than likely he's not going to be able to possibly win this, because if he only had that hammer, if he only had that one skill set thing that he can go on and wipe out everybody with. So we go on to also have Santa, who is to mention the presence of which that he had given Trudy in the past. Like when she would go on and ask that she needed a friend, Santa gave her a bunny. And whenever she needed to want to fly, Santa had gotten her a kite, because he's like, yeah, there's not much I can go on and do magically to have you fly, but like a kite is to be the best equivalent to that. So we have Trudy that is also talking about like her gift of wanting to put her parents back together, and Santa's like, I don't know if I can do that either. Like just having like people in relationships are really hard to just continue to work on, because Santa's to mention how like him and Mrs. Claus have been together for 1100 years, and it always is really hard work. So Santa's to go on and have this wedding ring, and he loses it, and he then realizes that he is coming into this sledgehammer, and he's like, aha. So we go on to also have Santa. He gets captured by the villains at some point in this story also. So we have the villains that end up getting captured, or we have Santa Claus who ends up capturing we have the villains that capture Santa. So Santa like doesn't have the sledgehammer at this point, and so they capture him, and they realize that his sack has all these things in it, like endless amount of toys. And they're like, well, hey, like, why do you have, like, how does this sack work? and we have Santa that's like, I don't know, it's magical. So it kind of feels like we have this Santa that's been doing this forever, but still like doesn't know how stuff works. He's just like, I don't know, it just works that way. So we have, of course, Scrooge, who dumps this sack, and he puts it into this fire pit, this fire pit, um, like in this fire, and so Scrooge ends up explaining how when he was a kid that there's one time where his dad was out of work and they couldn't get presents that year, and he would just watch on as his other neighbors were like much more in a better place, and they of course were going on and eating all these good meals and having like all these presents and all this Christmas, and so Scrooge of course was to get so upset that he went over to that neighbor's house and tried to steal everything from them in a kind of Grinch like way. So, honestly, Scrooge could have easily been called, like, Grinch, and that would have worked out just as well. But, anyways, so we come to find out that while Scrooge was trying to steal from this house, they he accidentally found himself next to this grandfather that had gotten so scared that he fell down these stairs and died. So after that, I guess Scrooge was on the naughty list for the rest of the years, simply because he could never go on and get Christmas because it was bad. So that's why we of course had Scrooge that so badly hated this holiday. So we have Santa that goes on to get free while the three goons are being distracted by Santa Claus making a Christmas miracle, where all of a sudden inside this room it is starting to snow, and everybody's like, oh my god, he really is real. All of a sudden it's snowing inside this room, and instead it's just Trudy dumping out all this styrofoam into this vent, and we have uh, when Scrooge starts to like kind of like touch one of the pieces, he's like, no, it's just styrofoam. He's faking. So we have Santa that gets away from these people, and it's just like, no, it's okay. Like, let's just go on, and like let's try to combat the kill team that has finally arrived. So the kill team that that Gertrude is to talk about, she states that, like, well, yeah, like, this team will be here within a couple hours, and you guys will really be effed, because they're going to go on and kill all of you, because they don't take any prisoners. So we have the kill team that goes on to have this commander, who, of course, is Commander Thorpe, that states, it's like, well, yeah, like, I like my missions like I like my women, like fast and hard. And so, like, kind of making this weird, goofy, like, banging analogy with his missions. And so he goes on and he, like, tells his guys that we're going to go on and just kind of really clean house here and get their money. So, get their money's worth. So, they come in here immediately to this front door to find that Candy Cane, Gingerbread, and Scrooge are all there. So, like, at first it seems they're going to go on and fight one another, but instead they realize that they're going to team up. And so now, like, this is when Santa realizes that he's really getting outnumbered here, that the naughty list is really piling up. And that's when he ends up finally finding this sledgehammer, and that's when he's going to go up against these people and take them all out. Because he's like, yeah, like, this is the one thing that I needed. This sledgehammer. So we now have the action picking up here. So at one point we go on and have Candy Cane and we have Gingerbread that is to finally find where Trudy is, and she of course is in this attic. So we have Gingerbread that is starting to make his way up this ladder to get to the attic, and he's like, I'm sorry, like, you obviously had one of these nails where I can see exactly where it is. Like, the thing about traps is you gotta make sure that they're not really seen all that well. So we go on to have Gingerbread that starts climbing up this ladder to find out that one of the ladder rungs is broken. So he ends up falling right onto this nail, hitting his chin, and the nail goes into his mouth. So we then go on to have Candy Cane that is climbing over Gingerbread, and once finally Gingerbread does go on and is to rip his chin from off of this nail, we then all of a sudden have Candy Cane make her way up this ladder, and so Trudy has set up this trampoline with all these bowling balls. It seems that this family just has a crap ton of bowling balls for whatever goofy reason. So Trudy starts smashing these bowling balls up against the trampoline, and all of a sudden they come flying out. And so Candy Cane starts to get hit by some of these, and then also when finally Gingerbread is to have this nail, and he has it by his head and is like looking at this, we all of a sudden have this bowling ball that comes flying and pushes this nail right into his head. He falls backwards onto this mat that has all these spiked items. So we go on to have Candy Cane, who ends up getting hit with these bowling balls, but then she ends up kind of making her way back to try to get to Trudy. And so by the time that Trudy is to have this like slingshot where she's tossing all these balls at Candy Cane, trying to distract her, we then finally have Santa that has kind of taken out a bunch of these kind of trooper like guys, these mercenaries, and kind of really sledgehammering them and killing them. And it's pretty good. And so we have Santa that goes on and is to find where Trudy is and is to smash with the sledgehammer Candy Cane and have Candy Cane fall back. And so Santa realizes that he has to go on and finish off Candy Cane. So he's telling Trudy, it's like, well, hey, just kind of turn around and like put your ears and your eyes just like in your hands and just like start singing Jingle Bells really loud. So Santa goes on and starts killing Candy Cane, starts smashing her with his sledgehammer. So we then have Santa and Trudy that go back and try to figure out how they can help out the rest of the people here. So we have, after everyone is getting tortured to try to figure out where this money is, and they're getting nutcrackered, we have Jason that goes on to reveal that he had stolen all the money and that only Jason knows where the money is. So, come to find out, the money is right by the nativity scene that has like Jesus and everybody and all the three wise men who are kind of watching over Jesus being born. So the guys all make their way to get this money that they realize is under this kind of this bit of hay. So they're all trying to collect the money. So we have Alva, Linda, and we have Bert, who are left. And so Scrooge is telling, well, now since they have the money, they can just kill everybody. So Krampus is watching on with these three people, Alva, Bert, and Linda. And so we end up finding our characters defending themselves by getting these fire pokers and smashing up Krampus. And so by the time that Trudy and Santa make it back to these people and realize, like, oh my god, like, Santa's helping us out? Okay, this is weird. So we have Santa asking if somebody knows how to work one of these guns, and Linda's like, well, yeah, like, I went hunting with my dad once, so it's like, oh, okay, so she knows how to use a gun. So we have Santa that goes on, and so Linda is firing away at certain number of these guys. So we have then Santa that is trying to take out some of these men, but then just kind of going on and leaving it up to both Linda and Jason to continue to defend themselves, as Santa is taking this almost kind of sleigh-like thing to slide his way down to take out more of these guys that are trying to get away with this money on these snowmobiles. So we have Jason and Linda who find Jingle, and so Jingle, of course, is fighting off with Linda pretty good, and so we get to a point where now, like, Jingle has Linda on the ropes, kind of choking her out. So Linda is to go on and grab this like icicle and jab it into the guy's neck, killing him. And so we end up having some good showing with Jason too, trying to. So we get to a point where both Linda and Jason, like, we have a moment where they're like, oh my god, like, they're kind of so close to realizing, like, yeah, we're good for one another, and maybe we should give this another shot. Like, they almost, I think we get them to kiss at this point. So we have Santa who goes out and decks all of these just random guys on these snowmobiles. So Santa then goes on into one of the snowmobiles himself after shoving one of these guys off. So we then have the final showdown between both Scrooge and between both Santa Claus. So we have this big showdown, and so we have this be that that Santa is to go on and easily take Scrooge down, and then he ends up getting shot up really bad by Commander Thorpe, and we end up having him getting taken out, I think, by Linda. So we all of a sudden realize that Santa is probably going to die at this point. So we have like the family that's like, well, hey, like, Santa, it seems, is like feeling very cold, so they start burning money to keep him warm. And so Santa, it seems, is to die, and so Santa's estate, it's like, well, yeah, I think I've used all my Christmas magic, so he dies. So I'm thinking, I'm like, okay, so who's gonna replace Santa then? Is it gonna be like the whole like Tim Allen thing where like somebody is to become Santa then? But no, we find out instead that like the whole family starts to state, it's like, well, I believe in Santa, I believe in Santa, I believe in Santa, I believe it. So they all of a sudden, with their belief, are to bring Santa back to life, and he is resurrected. So we go on and, of course, have Jason, who states to Santa Claus, is like, well, I don't know how much, or I don't know how I can thank you. And Santa's like, well, hey, like, you brought me back to life, so I'll consider us even. So we have Santa that finally realizes that his reindeer and his sleigh are back by this house. He's like, oh my god, like you guys came back, you schlubs of this and that. And so he's like ridiculing his deers. But then he ends up finding out that Santa and his sleigh went all the way back to get this spare bag. And also we had Mrs. Claus, who was to realize that Santa needed his skull crusher, and so Santa had read the note from Mrs. Claus, and he's like, "Oh, she knew something was going on." So yeah, so they're like, "All right." So Santa ends up getting up on his sleigh, and so Santa ends up riding off, And so yeah, so everything is to end that way. So with that said, I'm gonna try to quickly get out of here. There might have been a scene or two or this or that that I kind of quickly forgot about, but I wanted to try to also rush through this. So my bad if I forgot anything. There was one point where we had Morgan Steele that basically like jumps out this window and is running off, and we end up having this one line that Gertrude says about like, well, hey, like Jean Claude Van Dipshit just ran out on us, and so Morgan Steele runs off to find this kill team, and he's like, oh my god, like yeah, you guys are the good guys, and like thank you for your service and everything like that, and so the guys are just like, oh yeah, like great, let's go on and just shoot Morgan Steele and let's kill him. So Morgan Steele ends up dying, and so it's like, ah, the one action star dies. The one guy that we would have thought would have been able to like make his way out of this whole ordeal instead just gets killed. So yeah, so with that said, I think other than that, I think I covered most of everything. We had at one point that Candy Cane and Gingerbread were stating like, oh yeah, like the Santa Claus, he's really real. And yeah, so with that said, I think I'm gonna go on and get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody. One more thing. So we had the fight between Scrooge and Santa. So the fight ends up accumulating within that the little shack, and so that's when Scrooge ends up finding the scroll from Santa. It's like, ah, like you're really real. You really are this guy. So now I'm gonna go on and kill you, so that way this holiday will be completely over. And so we go in and find out that this shack, this shed, whatever that they're in, explodes, and we have them go on to fight with John Leguizamo's character Scrooge having these kind of these axes that are kind of used for like mountain climbing, as well as he has uh, these boots on that are also kind of used for the same purpose. So we all of a sudden have like Santa that is kind of getting pushed back by Scrooge, and so what Santa ends up doing is he ends up like chimneying him to death, as we have this kind of spare chimney. And so what he goes on and does is he kind of he kind of pushes his nose, he kind of twinkles his nose, and he grabs Scrooge and rams him through this chimney and tears him apart by doing so. And we end up seeing Santa at the top of this chimney with just kind of pieces of Scrooge all over the place. So that's kind of the way that Scrooge is to go out. But yeah, so many good one-liners from all these characters, but heaven forbid I remember all of them, or any of them. I liked when John Leguizamo was using basically the Violent Night song as a way to kind of work work the title into the movie. I also was to like the Jean Claude Van Dip Dip name. That was kind of funny to try to not curse as much as in this movie. We also just had some fun moments and some good story in this, so it was really good. Even though it was still just an okay movie. But yeah, I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye, buddy. Bye, everybody. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything that I forgot about. There might have been little small details or whatever about the story that I didn't go thoroughly into. Because also the way in which that I watched this movie just was kind of this grainy kind of thing, so I might have just, and plus I also saw this like the day before, so I had to go on and kind of remember everything, because by the time that I was going to try and get to this, like it was far too late in the day. I was like, I am going to need to sleep. So I decided to sleep and put out something else instead of going on and putting out Violent Night out. So that's just what happened. So bye everybody. Bye, everybody.